welcome to the Business Fix, where we amplify the mwananchi concerns in the business world. And today we are talking businesses in this country. Majority of our businesses are actually small, many micro, others small, and others medium-sized, classified as MSMEs, all right? So these are actually where the impact point is. If at all you want to change the business world, touch on that. And today we are looking at the issue of markets. Can SMEs explore and find markets externally outside the borders of Kenya? With your small farm, can you be able to look for market for your products? What needs to happen? If you're having a small manufacturing, a setup, can you look for market outside? That's the big question. We have to think global. We have to think continental with Africa, continental free trade area that is at play, at least slowly as it may be. Now, quite interesting numbers that we want to look at today. Now, 90% of businesses in this country are classified as SMEs, okay? But of this 90, a very tiny percent, it could be even a single digit, is able to explore the global market, the export market. And one of the issues that do come up is mentioning the challenges that do come with this particular venture. I have a small business, I'm not able to find a market outside there, my marketing budget is limited and whatnot. So first of all, information gap is huge in the SME world. That's what we're talking about. Another thing, high logistics costs. So you're thinking about transporting some of your products to Nigeria? You calculate that and you're like, no, it's not worth it. These are some of the concerns. But I'd like us to go down here and look at potential markets that as a small business owner, you can explore. First of all, charity begins at home. So Kenya, we have neighbors, our very good friends at the ESC. We have 350 million people within the ESC community. Can we tap into that market? Can you look where the demand is? Now, products that could actually flow well in the ESC market, processed foods, we talk about wheat flour, household products, soaps, plastics also in high demand, pharmaceuticals. Right here in Kenya, we have quite a vibrant one, but sometimes the policies that we put could drag some sectors behind, and construction materials, this cement, iron, and steel products. That is one market that we're looking at, ESC. Just our neighbors, Tanzania, Uganda, even the DRC. Now, let's talk Africa. From our region now to the whole continent, we have something called the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. It's basically saying that we want to open up the continent because Africa is the continent that trades the least amongst itself. So how can we do that? That's how we came up with Africa Continental Free Trade Area, to open up borders, bring down those walls, and make sure that there's easy movement of goods, services, and essentially people across the borders. So what are the high potential areas? If you can just look at that far end, agro-processing, food and beverages, horticulture, pharmaceuticals. And you're asking yourself, where are all these products going? Where is the demand? When you talk about agro-processing, there is actually a whole market in West African states. Southern African Development Community, SADC. North Africa also, they are in huge demand of some of these agro-processed foods. Now, food and beverages, West Africa and North Africa is a market that we have to think of. Egypt, Ghana, and Nigeria are in demand of our horticultural products, fresh vegetables, avocados, mangoes, herbs, and flowers, and pharmaceuticals, talking about healing this continent. West and Southern Africa, there is great opportunity right there. Other, of course, sectors that you're looking at is textiles and apparel. We are always told that back in the day, we used to have a lot of textile companies, and right now they have reduced. But the big question is, why? we'll be answering that. Another market that we have to look at is the EU, okay? The European Union. And this one offers preferential market access to 27 EU countries under the Kenya-EU Economic Partnership Agreement. This is the advantage. If you're able to get your products there, that entry point opens you up to 27 countries. But what are they in demand for? Avocados, coffee, tea. I know agricultural products traditionally dominate this conversation. Macadamia nuts, okay? Fresh vegetables, mangoes, natural essential oils, textile and apparel. You've had that conversation about, I bought something in a high-end store in London and realized it was made in Kenya. Well, that's the potential that we have. So EU, of course, we know what's going on in Britain in regards to EU, so that's another conversation, not for today. Asia is another market, a big one. Let's talk about China, India, Japan, and South Korea. And this is actually a rapidly growing market. There's huge demand for macadamia, coffee, tea, cut flour, sesame seeds, processed foods, and whatnot. So that's another market that SMEs can explore. Quite interesting right there. And let's talk about the Middle East. UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, Oman. Why this particular region? The region imports a large share of its food and reliable supplies. Reliable supplies. So these guys are importers and they have money. Some people call it the oil money, okay? If you're in fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, tea, Kenyan tea, halal meat products, this is quite a huge one, actually. If you are able to hack this one, it's a good one. Dairy products, processed foods and beverages, cut flour, and medicinal and aromatic plants. You've seen on TikTok, those guys who make, perfumes. Well, you can supply them as an SME in Kenya. Quite interesting. Think about that. And finally, the Americas, The world has shifted. What's happening in the Americas? The US, Canada, Latin America. Of course, many of us are paying attention because of the World Cup. Maybe your team was kicked out, but you have an opportunity to go back there as a business person operating in the MSME sector. So, premium prices, this particular market actually fetches very good prices, and Kenya benefits from preferential access to the US market through Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, that is AGOA. So what is being looked at? We are looking at textile and apparel, nguo, coffee, avocados, macadamia, tea, handicrafts, essential oils, and also honey and organic products. Are you able to tap into this particular market? And that is actually some of the things that we are going to unpack in today's conversation. Very important. I want to go back to one thing that is quite critical and what we'll be focusing on, the potential of this 90% of our businesses who do fall under the MSME category and what you can do to tap into the external market. And I have a heavy panel, wonderful people here who've taken time to speak to us amidst a World Cup. I don't know what team you guys are supporting. We'll have that conversation later on. Thank you very much. At the far end, we have Victor Tieno from Viva Consult, Karibu Sana. At the center, we have Sheila Olang, developmental economist. Thank you very much for making time.
Thanks for having me.
And right here, we have Okisegre Ojepat from Fresh Produce Consortium, FPC Kenya. Yep. Thank you very much for making time.
Thank you.
To speak to us. So SMEs, quite a vibrant sector. We say that our economy is termed as very informal, Victor. We have a hugely informal economy. That's why they say when KRA tries to tax, it gets it very difficult because people are not in the tax net and whatnot. So we want to simplify this conversation for starters. When you talk about MSME, because there is micro, there is small, and there is medium-sized enterprises, businesses. These are what dominate the Kenyan business landscape. How do we differentiate this subcategorization under the MSMEs?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think as you rightly put it, and it is recorded time and time again, MSMEs in Kenya are quite important for the economy, accounting for around 98% of all registered businesses. As per the KNBS 2016 data, we have around 7.4 million SMEs, with 5 million being informal in one way or another. And it presents a challenge, but also a majority of them are micro. So we don't have a lot of medium-sized businesses. So I think that's a challenge. Then largely, if you look at that data, we see that over 80% of MSMEs are within wholesale retail. So, and that's why we always say Kenya is almost like a supermarket economy of sorts, where a majority of our businesses buy to sell. So you find that this becomes a challenge for the economy whenever there is any systemic shock, whether it is COVID or any other shock. You find that because the profit margins for wholesale retail are very small, you find that they are always struggling. I think government for such a long time has not been able to solve the problem of being able to support MSMEs. And a lot of the products that we see that are going to support MSMEs are just maintaining them in a rut. So because the profit margins are thin, it means that you have to borrow cash flow to stay afloat. So you're not in business. Okay. You're just trying to stay afloat. So that's why we are seeing all this, whether it's Hustler Fund, is a cash flow financing mechanism. It can't move you from wholesale retail. It can retain you inside. And a lot of products that you see from a financial perspective are just cash flow products. And then we always see we are always in a catch-22 of sorts as an MSMEs.
Definitely.
So I think this particular conversation is extremely important, because then it helps us change direction and help entrepreneurs to move from wholesale retail and start exploring manufacturing, agriculture, and agribusiness.
Definitely. So on the tail end of that, I know you've laid a very nice foundation, and I like that. We want to understand, when you talk about MSMEs and SMEs, those are two different classifications, because there is the micro element.
Yeah.
How do you end up saying this is an SME, so that from the get-go, even our viewers with their businesses understand, actually I fall under the micro, I might be a small or medium-sized enterprises, briefly?
Yeah, so the term MSMEs is defined in the MSME Act of 2012, which gives categorizations of micro, small, medium businesses based on turnover or sales, ama mauzo, for business people. Okay. So we see if you have sales, just gross sales of between 0 to 500,000, that's classified as a micro. 500,000 to 5 million is termed as small. And of course now medium goes from there. Okay. But even as MSMEs is being defined in the MSME Act, still financial institutions have a different way of defining MSMEs. If you look at KRA, the way they look at MSMEs is quite different. But the primary legislation that defines MSMEs in Kenya is the micro, small, medium, MSC Act of 2012.
Okay. And how do they? Because now I want people to understand, and I know I'm trying to, reason why I'm insisting on this is because as much as we're going to talk about opportunities, people need to understand where they fall. And sometimes there is that broad categorization, I'm an MSME, or you don't know where you belong. So how do I judge if I'm running the operation solo? Yeah? Am I a micro? If I have like 20 employees, am I a medium size? Am I a small? And is this important to sort of classify this and offer clarity to this?
Yeah, so that has been the challenge for a long time, and I think the State Department of MSMEs is reviewing the Act, so that it is in tune to the reality. But as far as it is concerned in Kenya, it doesn't matter if your turnovers are between 0 to 500,000 annually. That's a micro. If you're doing between 500,000 to 5 million, that's a small, and anything above 5 million is a medium-sized enterprise.
Okay.
So that, whether, irrespective of employee, I think that largely is the categorization that the government uses whenever it is engaging or when we're having conversations about MSMEs.
All right, so turnover. How much you generate, very, very important. Sheila,
yes.
It's quite interesting when you look at our economy, when we mention these numbers, that majority of our businesses fall under this categorization. Is that the reality world over? And from an economic point of view, is that healthy? Is that how things work?
I think it's quite an interesting perspective, because we don't speak enough about small businesses, when in reality our economy, the Kenyan economy, is primarily run using MSMEs. They employ just about, now I think almost 80% of anyone who claims to be employed is actually employed in a small business. So gone are the days when people used to say, I'm going to, study, take a brown envelope, and someone is going to employ me somewhere. That's not the reality today. The reality today is that the Kenyan economy is being driven largely by these small businesses. And unfortunately, when we do a lot of our economic discussions, we don't tend to think of ourselves even as the small business owners, that we are the engine that is driving this particular economy. Now, is this unique to Kenya? Does this happen in the world? Kenya today is classified, we are somewhere in the middle of, I hate using so much of the IMF definitions of where our economy is, because I don't think it's very reflective, but we are a developing economy, we are a growing economy, and it's quite normal that in a growing economy you have a space where there's a lot of small businesses that are taking space and taking shape and shaping the economy. Why is it important that we understand the gravity of small businesses? When we have conversations such as access to credit, we are trying to have this discussion about moving away from the wholesale retail space and graduating into manufacturing. When you're trying to do that, it means that you need to be able to have a good business environment. You need to be able to have access to credit. So every time we're planning the economy, and for example, we are saying that we are borrowing domestically, we are crowding out this engine that is driving the economy from accessing credit. You see, that's why you always, at any point, you need to remember the biggest employer of Kenyans is actually small businesses. So you plan around it. The stage that Kenya is in terms of its economic growth is, like I said before, it is quite normal and quite encouraged, actually, that we need to encourage a lot of small businesses, because the state cannot be able to employ and hold everyone in. Now, there are few caveats to it. The state needs to be able to benefit from having a lot of these small businesses. Most of them are informal in nature. Most of them are not captured within the formal tax system. So the state really doesn't get to maximize the most out of these small businesses. But that conversation cannot be had without also discussing you showing value for money, so that these businesses are also encouraged to give into the state, because the state is also catering to their specific needs as small businesses. So it needs to be this relationship that, you scratch my back and I scratch your back. We are on course. I think Kenya is reaching a bit of maturity. We need to formalize so that we can graduate away from wholesale retail and start moving more into local value addition. Because right now we're doing a lot of exportation of raw materials. We're not doing the value addition locally. So we need to graduate. And the engine that can help us graduate this is not the state, but it is going to be these small businesses, that they're empowered, that they have a good environment, that they can actually do local value addition. And then it picks us from there. And maybe just to close up on that, you were talking about the EU, for example. One of the best products we have in the country is coffee. Coffee earns us big bucks, but we export a lot of coffee, a lot of raw beans of coffee, right? They have a lot of protectionism mechanisms that they do, for example. And so when we don't sit down and try to see, well, how do we help? How do we negotiate better so that we are doing every single local value addition here, so we employ the most here and we maximize before we send out a final product, then it's going to be very difficult to sustain or to scale up into this manufacturing space of small businesses.
Definitely. And it's quite interesting. We'll come to the issue of financing, because the sector has been crying, and this whole issue of crowd-out effect, and now we have a budget for the financial year beginning tomorrow. The deficit will be financed by 1 trillion bob from the local economy. So it will be interesting to see how this crowd-out thing plays out. but we'll come to that later. Oksegre, you've been very vocal, specifically since you're in the fresh produce sector. And this sort of strings up to the agricultural sector. I mean, agriculture, as we know, as we've been told, is the backbone of Kenya's economy. Talk to me about SME, the status of MSME, a majority within the agricultural value chain. I know you had mentioned we are heavily in the retail. We are a big supermarket, but are we selling broccoli and managu in that supermarket, or it's something totally different?
Yeah, thanks, Noah, and thanks, colleagues. I think this is, first I must congratulate you for asking us to have this conversation openly at this point in time when we're closing the year and starting a new year tomorrow, so that we get into a new year with a totally different view from what we have done in the past. So, whereas I agree that the government has a definition for MSMEs and SMEs, from the global perspective, all our businesses are not even at medium. We are all still small. However, government in its wisdom chose to classify based on turnover. But just to answer your question, yes, we are trading, but we're trading in a very uncultured way. We're trading among ourselves, and we are unable to document the kind of trade that we have. So we do not have sufficient statistics to be able to drive certain decisions, since our business is based on a lot of casualty and little of documentation, until you get to a point where you reach a product where either some certification or some accreditation or some sort of packaging standards have been defined. And at that point in time, then you are demanded or required to have a receipt. That is when a lot of conversation in terms of the documentation comes in. But from the agri-rural perspective, it's about deliver to so-and-so, and transaction happens without really having a lot of documentation. So it becomes very difficult sometimes to classify where you are when a lot of farming happens around farm gate, and the sales happen around the same farm gates, and the consumption is around the same area. And so movement from point A to point B, from the farms to the market, is not very well structured. But the comforting part of it, and where there's hope, is that we are graduating very fast as a country. And I'm happy with these SMEs and MSMEs, how aggressive they are, and everyone is trying to get something. And thank God for the government of Kenya, since they opened up the space, that now for you to register a business entity, you no longer have to be 2 or 3 directors. You can now be a director as one person and be an entity. That has encouraged many people within the informal sector to register businesses, particularly the youth and the women, now own business companies that have one director, and the turnaround in terms of the registration process was also fast-tracked. Before, we will go through a lawyer, you have to go through so many documents. Now when it comes to registration, you want to click in a computer, key in yourself, go through the process. Within a week, you have your certificate. Within a week, you can go through the licenses. Within a week, you already are able to get into some structured arrangement between you and the buyer or the seller. But we're still very informal. When you look at the agri sector, particularly that drives, and as you said, it is also classified that agriculture is our mainstay, and something that I'm very vocal in terms of really getting that statement redefined, because we call agriculture a mainstay of our economy. But colleagues will tell you that this year, particularly starting tomorrow, the budget allocated to agri sector is 1.3% of the annual budget. And a lot of our MSMEs and SMEs in Kenya are structured around about agri products. And so if a lot of our business is within the agri product, particularly in the devolved units, except the cities and certain urban centers, then it means something needs to shift. So we are in a good place, because I get a lot of inquiries today, How do I become an exporter? How do I do this business? And that has shaped the way you see even the retail process. If you go to the supermarkets today, you look at the fresh corner where there's agri. There's a lot of organization around there, packaging, branding. There's a lot of traceability that's happening around that area. Okay. So we are on a good path. However, I think we need to sober up as a country and agree that our business can no longer be driven by other people. We must drive this agenda ourselves. We are having this discussion when we have finance, the financing agribusiness is happening in town. And being there this morning and just looking at the strategies that have been put around that area, then you realize there's a lot that we need to do. There's so many strategies in place, and the people who design strategies have designed strategies, but we seem to be waiting for somebody somewhere to call us to order. So I think for us, from where I sit, I'm very happy this conversation is happening, and I'm happy to look at Kenyans and encourage them to walk to us and walk to anybody within the organizations that can help them to be able to structure their businesses. They do not have to fear. I know there's a lot of fear now when you have a structured business in the name of taxes, or government is targeting us on tax, whereas the taxman is doing their work. But if we're able to know what kind of books and what we need to organize in terms of records, really we should not be scared about tax, because ultimately we must be able then to operate within a governed structure and compliance to certain sets for us to be able to prevail in the marketplace, both in the domestic space and most importantly when we start crossing the borders and we want to do international business.
All right. Very, very important. And I want to come to Victor. There is a young man somewhere, a young lady somewhere. They have their small business. They have a farm. They're doing fish. They're doing some fruits here and there. And when they're listening to this conversation, it's almost giving, first of all, have your house in order before you even think about going out. So think about formalization, lay those foundational, structures for your business before even thinking about leaving this country. And I'd like us to unpack that, because if we're talking about SMEs tapping into the global market, we should start somewhere. What are those low-hanging fruits? Coming from a very agricultural conversation, what are those low-hanging fruits that majority of our SMEs can work on, at least to build up locally and later on tap into the international space?
I think one of the things that needs to happen is a mindset shift. We are very individualistic in terms of the way we approach business. But if you look at successful models that have worked world over, we see capital being aggregated. So looking at different communities, whether it's Asian communities, we see capital, a business is not run by an individual, but by a community. So one of the challenges also, one of the opportunities that we have as small businesses is to be able to, and we've seen this even in coffee, tea, and a lot of other sectors that are successful by coming within cooperatives. So it gives you an opportunity to be able to bring in capital. And because export by its very nature is very formal and capital intensive, it's very difficult for you to be able to do it alone. Think about your coffee farmer, tea farmer, or even in milk production. Yes, someone has one cow, but they're part of a whole. So as entrepreneurs, young people, we need to start working together with others, so that you're not just starting a business alone with your 10K, 20K, 30K, but coming as a community, either within an estate or for schoolmates or whatever, and starting to aggregate capital so that you're able to access bigger markets. I think that mental shift has to happen. Of course, we can blame government because cost of doing business is also very high. I was looking at pharmaceutical, and there's a CAM report that was saying even within pharmaceutical, you need 53 licenses for you to operate within the pharmaceutical space. So, of course, just putting that on the side in terms of ease of doing business, I think aggregation of capital has to happen so that you come together. Number two is doing more research other than just having what we call the ship mentality. where I see Noah opening a car wash, I go open a car wash. Or it's a wines and spirit, I go open a wines and spirit. I think there has to be a bit of research. And of course, we have a number of government agencies that can be able to support that, whether it is KEPROBA under the Ministry of Investment, who have been able to do research in terms of some of the markets that are there. You listed some of them. Whether it is, Kenya is exporting goats and sheep to the UAE, around 130 million USD. What is the cost of a car of a sheep, of a goat? It's 5K. So it means that Noah can bring 2 sheep, colleagues can bring 2. And within a couple of years, we go to Kitui, because Kitui and Wajir, Isiolo, West Pokot are places where this is thriving. So that then we can be able to start accessing that market, of course, being supported by government agencies, or just doing your own research, just like you've done. There are a number of opportunities. Mabuyu is something that we eat. Mabuyu is a superfood. You can export mabuyu. I saw, I think the other day we saw in the news, someone uprooted an entire baobab tree and was going to plant it elsewhere. So we have a lot of resources that are here, whether it is moringa. I mean, there are many. I saw the other day, in the supermarket, mabuyu being packaged as a product. And I was like, these are things that are falling down on trees. Aloe vera is another very easy thing. You go to Voi, where my wife lives, aloe vera grows naturally. You go to Carrefour in the supermarket, just a liter of it is 1,200. 1,200 for something that is just out there. Talk about Managu. So opportunities are there. I think it's just a question of course, looking at economic partnership agreements or countries where Kenya has agreements, looking at some of the products that are going there. We can't do coffee, all of us. We can't do tea, all of us. But we can do macadamia, we can be able to do moringa, we can be able to do some of these products, which are superfoods that can be exported there. So the question is then, once we've identified that, whether it is aloe vera or whatever, what do we need to do to be able to access that market? I can't do it alone. So it means either I'm going to KEPROBA or I'm going to a government agencies, knocking the door and saying, look, this is an opportunity that we want to explore, and just aggregating our capital first before even going to financial institutions to be able to access this. So we have KIRDI, we have KIE. I mean, yes, we can bash government, but there are agencies that can be able to support in manufacturing, say, for example, Kenya Industrial Estate or KIRDI. I mean, these are agencies whose sole mandate is to be able to support small businesses to be able to start manufacturing. So that responsibility also has to come from our young entrepreneurs in Kenya.
Definitely. So quite important right there. You've said foundationally, it is the mind, Thus, if your mind, I mean, we are reflective of what is in our minds at the end of the day. So that is one, mental shift. Regards to how we do business. And secondly, you say do your research. Be on top of your game as an SME. You have no excuse at the end of the day. Very, very important. Sheila, looking as an economist, most of the times economists are blamed and people complain, you come, you discuss, you give us GDP figures nicely, but personally, I can't feel it because people say we don't eat numbers. Yes. So for our MSMEs, other than mindset shift and also, aggregating, what do you think should happen if at all we are to empower these SMEs? And I know in some ecosystem, people always mention Singapore, and they took some pretty radical measures to transform their nation. From where you stand, if at all you had the powers, what are we working on to transform our MSMEs to be export ready?
I think there's a lot of a gap in information. I think if they were to do a survey today and ask how many small businesses are aware of what it takes to be able to export out, whether they understand their requirements for AGOA, there's a lot of gatekeeping in information, not necessarily from the government side, but also from the small businesses who are not ambitious enough, right? And I would just like to add on what my colleague was saying, that you can't be having your 3 baobab trees and then expect to make a good return on your investment by exporting alone. You have to aggregate, you have to organize yourself. And how do you do this? This current government actually decided to establish a brand new ministry for cooperatives, right? And SACCOs and small businesses. And that was intentional. I don't think we understand enough why that particular ministry was flagshipped. It was because you needed to be able to take the small businesses, and then you needed to combine them with what structures they need to be in so that they come together in a SACCO or they come together in a cooperative. And when they do this, then you can bargain better. You can get one export license for one cooperative to export all your omena, right, out of the country, or all your mabuyu, as opposed to me trying to pay for the licenses. These licenses are not cheap. For example, I'm a small business owner. I export omena to the United States. Getting that license for me, I pay about 70,000 per year to just have the license to export. Whether or not I export it, I need to pay that, right? So imagine if you're trying to do that as a small business owner, it becomes difficult. But when we come together as a SACCO, when we come together as a cooperative, then we can bargain much, much better. So I think aggregating capital is a non-negotiable, if you ask me. I think the government has already set aside this apparatus or these tools, such as these cooperatives and SACCOs, where they need to organize themselves. I come from Migori County, so I'm very familiar with the blue economy space. I think the conversation about coffee, tea has been exhausted over and over again, and not enough attention is given to other products within, other food system or other products within the country. And one of the things that I admire a lot within those more mature products such as coffee and tea is the ability to actually aggregate and form cooperatives and SACCOs that they can use them to negotiate prices and things like that. And that's why they're making some headwind. While us on the other side in the blue economy sector, we're yet to get strong enough to establish these SACCOs and cooperatives and really understand. There have been case studies, right? So we've seen a lot of case studies of certain cities. There's a particular city in Italy that, using cooperatives alone, they were able to revive a city that depended on steel and manufacturing. And when those industries closed down, it's cooperatives that came together. They pulled resources together. They were able to control absolutely everything within the city. So we should not underestimate the power of cooperatives and SACCOs. But this information needs to be able to reach the business owners, right? Because if they don't know that this is how it needs to be, then we'll have a very nice, shiny product that the government has. And you have your nice, shiny products as a small business owner, but there's a lot of mismatch. People cannot imagine that their mabuyu is actually needed somewhere, and it's quite useful. There's avocados that just fall down on the, where my mother comes from, we have avocados that just fall down around the compound, and then all of a sudden you go to the United States and you need to pay 1,000 shillings for an avocado that is very tasteless compared to the one that comes from here. So we need to marry these two concepts together in order for us to maximize.
Definitely. Aggregating.
Yeah, and I think finally you're asking me, we're always pointed as economists, the finger is pointed at us, and we say inflation is down and GDP is good, so what are you talking about? And I know, but it's also important to understand that, we like to sometimes focus on what is going on positively, so I don't have to answer why you don't have 100 shillings in your pocket. Yeah. But you're alluding to this aspect of purchasing power, that a good economy is felt. I don't have to keep giving you a lot of jargons. You can just feel that you have a good economy. And a good economy is where you have purchasing power, meaning that people have money to circulate within the economy. And like I say, these small businesses are the ones that are driving these engines to be able to drive this money around. But there's an information gap, if you ask me. I'm very well aware of the things that are going on within the Ministry of Cooperatives and SACCOs, and they're doing a wonderful job and they have good products, but they have a task in order to educate these other sectors away from the coffees and the rest of them, educate them on the products that they have, and then ease up into being able to give them access to the information. Okay. Streamline them. Don't need 50 certificates just to export one particular product. Maybe make an exception, right? That if you come together and you're a small SACCO and your products are worth X amount, maybe it's not 70,000 for the year. Maybe it's something else until your turnover starts to pick up, and then you can pay a little bit more. There's interesting ways that can help us get to this Singapore we're trying to get to, right?
Okay, definitely. And in the fresh produce subsector, there is progress? I mean, you guys are very active. In fact, the other day, you know, you're out there looking for alternative markets as EU shifts their goalposts. You're like, let us try out different places.
Yeah.
But how have you guys managed in the fresh produce sector? And we want to use that as a practical example of transforming MSMEs to be export ready. How have you guys done it?
Yep, thanks, and thanks, colleagues, for that. Let me start by saying I'm privileged that I'm sitting in a position of privilege, and that I've seen small individuals, what I would call smallholder farmers, move from just small into farmer groups, into cooperatives, and into the exports. An example is one of our members who is in Nandi, is a cooperative that started from farmer groups, and now they have a license. And as we're talking, we are looking at supporting them to get into the exports into Netherlands, right from the farmer group, right in Nandi, and now we're looking at a market in Netherlands that they will be supplying anytime now, and they've gone through certification. The first thing I want to say is what they have said in terms of information. A few years ago, when I joined this industry, it had looked like a cartel, just like it is in many industries in Kenya, where a perception has been created over a time that a specific business will be done by specific families or specific people or specific class. And like today, anytime I tell people about export, people say, it's too expensive. I want to demystify it. Mm-hmm. You can export 5 kilos. You can also export 500 kilos. You can export 5 tons, or you can export 100 tons. Critically, I must say here that regardless of the product that you're exporting, the export requires consistency. The export requires timeliness. The export requires that you must communicate. The export requires that you must comply by a set of rules by the importing party. And that means how it means to us the opportunity both from the private sector and the public sector, and you from the fourth estate, is to break down in very clear, simplified communication, like the 10 commandments. And you shall not, so that we do not also give us these strategies. We've learned one strategy today, and I agree. It's a whole booklet. And nobody cares about that booklet. The people in the village just need to know, I will produce my managu or my avocado. Like now, we have avocado farmers. All they need to know is that I will produce my avocado, and if we all come from the village like myself, when I look at our millet in the farm, I don't need to be told it's mature. There's a stage in life, I just look at it and I know this is mature, and all of us harvest at a certain time. Mm-hmm. So we need to know that this fruit at this size, who is coming to tell me it's time to harvest, and when I harvest, where am I taking it? The challenge we have in certain jurisdictions or destinations in this country is because, I don't know for some reason why we are selfish. We have made it difficult to be able to aggregate or come together. And so a person tells you, my products are rotting, and yet he has 10 trees. There's somebody else who has 100 trees. There's somebody else who has 2 trees. And they're all within the vicinity. But for some reason, I must stress this, that Kenya has lost a deficit of something we call trust. The trust deficit in Kenya needs to be fixed. Trust deficit among brothers, trust deficit among communities, trust deficit with the countrymen. Today, the biggest challenge I have when I'm dealing with the exporters is the exporters that have exported to other destinations without even a contract, because they think the other party on the other side, international market, is a much more trusted partner than giving that product to a Kenyan exporter who has muscle and who has an agreement on the other side. So what am I saying? One, that we have information gap. And I must say, in our industry, we have demystified, simplified. We are now availing information. We are not in every village, but at a click of a button or a phone, we are able to get it. We have also been able to sit down with the regulators, reduced the licensing process that will take us 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. Now we have brought it to a point where you can actually have your license within a week, as long as you have complied. And we have also then broken this to say, you do not have to be a farmer for you to be an exporter. We say, if you're a farmer, you can actually just be a farmer, and you, Noah, can actually be the exporter and be the trader. We have also then broken down, there's this culture that we have in Kenya where everybody wants to be a broker. And I don't have a problem with brokers, because when I go to the insurance brokers are well recognized, they are known, they're actually called brokers. When it comes to agriculture, a broker is a devil. You don't want to see the guy. The guy also doesn't want to tell you how the transaction is being done. And therefore, we have called them names. So what we've done within our fresh produce industry is we've changed the name from brokers to marketing agents, because they have a role they play. And they know people in the village, and the people in the village trust them because they're the sons and daughters of that village. So they're able to consolidate, aggregate together, pick that product and hand it over to the next person, and we trust this person as our contact person. So let me demystify the concept of saying export is expensive. Export is not expensive. Export logistics may be not understood by many people, but expensive depends on the product. Expensive depends on the value of where you want to go, and critically is the connectivity. In fact, our biggest cost of export is on logistics. Our biggest cost of transport today, of export today, logistics. Then we have energy, and then we of course have the product itself. We have labor, and I can break it down every percentage, but the huge chunk is about 40 to 50% of our export portfolio today in Kenya goes into logistics. Mm-hmm. It takes $3, for example, between $2.2, on a low season like now, between $2 to sometimes up to $5, depending on which destination you're taking, per kilo. That's not very cheap. However, if you have done your arithmetic and you have agreed on a costing, then it's easy. And now, when now we come in and say, government, please lower this, is because we also want to become competitive. Because the more expensive we are as a country, then the buyers, since they buy from other jurisdictions, particularly our neighbors, then shift to our neighbors, and we become uncompetitive, because then our price in the marketplace, our products are more priced than the others. But the bottom line here is, anybody who is within the agri sector, including coffee, including tea, we have now demystified and broken down what I would consider cartels into a regulation and processes that can allow you to see visibility of what's happening, including at a logging in of your license. You can actually track and know where it is, and you can pick a phone call. And so that I can return it back to our colleagues to be able to comment, is we have also then made it clear that if you want to become an exporter, for example, within our industry, we are structured in such a way that we want you to be held accountable. You then belong to an association that is existing, and we are saying, if you think you're not comfortable joining the existing associations, please create your own, but it must be recognized, it must operate within certain rules, so that we know where you are. Because before, you will hear there was a broker, he went to some village X, bought a product and disappeared. At the airport, we will hear, oh, then some Kagai packaged and he disappeared. Now we have a whole traceability system that is working. We're able to track from point A until it gets to the market. So my encouragement to Kenyans is that, yes, there's an opportunity. Though we have challenges, we need to kill this thing we call trust deficit that is among us. That is what is killing us. Okay. And last but not least, looking at products, we need to say, if we are talking about avocado, we must understand that avocado is bulk, and there's a way we handle that product. If it's mango, we must know, so that we also stop this thing of Kenyans going to promise and say, we overpromise. We will deliver 10 tons. We will deliver 100 tons. We do not have data. So you've had a scenario where trust deficit has moved from the farms. I don't know why you had Kenyans tell you, I have had. And the conversation ends, oh yeah, I will bring. The next time you're calling them, they are not picking the phone call, they're not responsive.
Okay.
So lastly, what we've done now is we have also then decided to have a way that we have a connection between Kenya, us within the country, and now we are working with the diaspora. Our Kenyans in every mission out there, and we are now talking about how do we get even our Kenyans in the diaspora to be able to eat our managu. Instead of waiting until you bulk to 20 tons, you can actually then package certain products to go to certain markets and ensure that our Kenyans in the diaspora can help us to be able to drive that export that we're talking about. However, when you go back to financing, it goes back to how we are structured, because you must be consistent. And when we are doing your contracts in terms of supply, some importers on the other side will tell you, I will pay you within 2 weeks, I will pay you within this based on the contract you have. Okay. At the point of servicing that contract, it means you must be consistent. If you do not have a way of funding, of resourcing your operations, then at some point you may get into a ditch, and that spoils our reputation in terms of supply consistency in the marketplace. Definitely. So and I could speak about this over and over again because this is what I do every day.
I know. I know, Kisegere, very passionate. Yeah. Quite interesting numbers here. We have these two areas when it comes to fruits. Coincidentally, when we talk about fruits, we come to you, Victor. But briefly, as we do the final round of this conversation, have around 12 minutes. ESC. This is the market we're being told, 350 million people, quite a huge market. These are the products. There is that one. And then there is another one about Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Also another element that has been publicized as a game changer for the continent of Africa. Let's start with these two areas. Are we able, our small SMEs, able to tap into these two markets? And if so, how do we accelerate that to make it a reality as soon as possible?
I think we also need to be very careful not to expect too much from SMEs. Mm-hmm. In the sense that if you look, and of course I was avoiding talking about the business environment, but if you look at the business environment, it's not an encouraging environment that allows for an SME to formalize and move from wholesale retail to manufacturing and agribusiness. If you look at the contribution of manufacturing to GDP in Kenya has been declining and is less than 10%. So these are big manufacturers who are already struggling. And of course, we know the factors of production. Electricity is quite high compared to our peers. Our taxes are quite high. There's a lot, even moving agricultural products. We have sales, we have branding. The cost of doing business alone before we even start exporting is a challenge. So I think even as we would want to encourage our MSMEs to be able to export to ESC, to Africa through CFTA, I think the cost of doing business has to go down for them to have the financial muscle for you to be able to export. Because if I have 1 million shillings and maybe, and this is just an example, 300,000 is going to compliance, it means I'm not able to sell product. So that becomes a challenge. Number two is we need to see government investing in agriculture in a big way. AU, I think, has given a benchmark of around 10%. And of course, as colleague has said, we are at less than 2%. So what this means is that the extension services, the things that the farmer needs for him to be able to reach a level where they can be able to export, someone has to invest. So that's a challenge. Number two is we also need to invest in research and innovation. So if you've ever gone to any of the expos in Tanzania, in Uganda, you always see the same things. Either it's Curio, Masai Shuka, one is from Tanzania, one is from Kenya. We are selling the same thing. So we need to start innovating. Yes. And it's not the SME who's going to use their own resources to invest. Government has to invest. The budget allocation on research and innovation is 0.8%. Mm-hmm. The recommendation is for it to be at 2%. So instead of government building houses focusing on infrastructure, and giving cash flow financing. The financing or the funding has to go to this structural investment that would allow for MSMEs to be able to grow, research, and go access these particular export markets.
All right. And we have around 10, actually, let me see, we have around 10 minutes. And as we wrap this up, Sheila, I like putting people in hypothetical situations.
Right.
And so that, it's very easy to be very descriptive and sit safely and be like, you should improve, credit access, But imagine right now you are put at the helm of the MSME ministry, which is an active one, and of which you told me you know how things are working in there. This is just imagination, Nobody should know, but you never know. But the whole point is, if at all you are in a position of influence, what are you changing with these concerns that you've raised, especially that issue of business environment, trust deficit? How do we change this narrative?
I think I would start an aggressive campaign of mobilizing and organizing these small businesses and then matching them up to the market for the opportunity so that they prepare, they have products that are actually needed in the market. This would be something that would be research-based, data-based. I would come to you and I would tell you there's the EU market. They're specifically looking for omena. So I want all of you to come together, and it's going to be a very seamless process. My job is to act as a middle ground to make it easy to connect the product to the market. So preparedness is the name of the game, so that when the opportunity comes, we are prepared. So very seamlessly, what do you need? 1, aggregate yourself, organize yourself. 2, as a government, how can I help you? If you talk about fresh produce, for example, you find that there's a lot of post-harvest loss. We're not even discussing that. About 40%, for example, in blue economy is lost just because of post-harvest loss. We get the fish and then we don't know what to do. We don't have refrigeration, we don't have logistics, the whole 9 yards. So maybe that's where I come in, so I can facilitate so that we reduce your post-harvest loss. I come in so that I can have almost an army. You know how you have the community health workers who are able to help us with communicable diseases? They come to your house and they spray for you the malaria sprays, and they do HIV, testing. I would aggressively do that to match it to the market, just because I know that there is no job waiting for you at the end of the tunnel. You need to create those jobs. You need to create those opportunities. And it's been done before. Kenya wouldn't be the first one trying to do it. If you look at South America and the aggressivity with coffee, for example, that is where it started from. It started from small farmers coming together and then doing it. Information is very, very, very critical. The minute somebody realizes Kenyans are very hardworking and they're very entrepreneurial, if you just told them it was just as simple as A, B, C, and I'm here to assist you, trust me, it will be a big game changer, right?
Yes.
And then it would be able to help us then consolidate them, give more access to credit, give more access to FDI and investment, so that we can transition into this manufacturing space that we constantly keep talking about, because we cannot sustain as we are today. So yes, if I was sitting in that docket for 5 minutes, then my first order of the day would be to be very strategically having this door-to-door campaign about how do we aggregate so we prepare for the market. I think we have enough trade agreements. I think we have enough market research of what is needed where. Now, what is missing is to link this information to the people and the product, so that then we can then be able to drive the two sides together. This will fix the problem you're telling me that we are having as economists of screaming about the macroeconomics and not talking about the purchasing power. This would fix our access to foreign currency, because the minute we trade, we're able to get dollars back into the country. And this would be, a really easy way. I think Kenya, the issue even with trust is sometimes we have very good information, very good products, and they're really good on paper, but then they don't really get to the person that they're about to get to. And in Kenya, we know everything. So unless you give us better information, what I know is what I know, and I stick by it. So yes, information is key. It's the key to success in this case.
Definitely. Okay, Sagre, as we finish up,
My 1 minute as CS for
for me, it's a very
SMEs.
simple. Thanks. For me, it's a very simple thing. First, let me comment on what you said about Africa. The deficit within African countries is, you'll be shocked, that a few days ago I went to Tanzania and I was being asked at the border questions that didn't make sense, and I still had to carry identification to go through official stamping, and yet I am part of the ESC. So the question is, why are we the community? So we must deal with some of these things. Must be through free movement of people and services. Goods and services must move, and services cannot move without people. So we need to remove that trust deficit and fix the reality, and whatever is documented must be either actioned or abandoned, the whole thing. Within Africa, we need to fix our logistics. So Africa is not going to trade with Africa with the logistics challenges today. It's cheaper for me to fly from, okay, let me say this. Practically speaking, for you to fly to West Africa, North Africa, you fly into Asia, then fly into West Africa. That's what happens today. We fly there and we fly to Asia first, exit Africa to come back to Africa. It doesn't make sense. And yet I cannot fly from here directly into West Africa, courtesy of unnecessary bureaucracies, logistics. And I dare say, I don't know when this dream of one Africa will come in. We are trading with 54 different currencies. So we still have a long way. In the meantime, let's trade in the name of, let's be practical. Uganda has pineapple, Kenya does not have. Whatever we consume in Kenya is 95% from Uganda. So already you know that we can trade with our neighbors without having to argue. So in terms of documents, research, those papers are here. What I would like to ask the Kenyan government is to get to know that business is driven by SMEs, and today the cost of doing business in this country is just way too expensive as compared to the neighbors, and we are pricing ourselves out of the country. And governments must learn to sit together with the private sector and ask, where are the issues? How do we work together to encourage many players so that you're able to have more people to collect tax from? Today, many businesses, actually, I dare say that the way it is structured, it looks like the black market is being encouraged because people are trying to run away instead of encouraging people. So there's a bit of some work to be done. So I go back to what I said. The trust deficit needs to be fixed. 2, we must then be able to say we can come together. And I want to request you from the media, since you have the platform, to allow such conversations to now take place in all your stations or your programs that encourages businesses, different value chains, but have this business conversation and bring us here with governments and take people. Lastly, I want to see a situation where there are consequences. Governments have signed treaties and contracts, but I don't think there are consequences. If I did not fulfill, what happens? I see governments at the beginning of the year have something they call contract targets that they have. And the way it is structured is, it is now in the private sector also, the number of meetings attended, tick. That is not, we must then agree as a country, what do we want? Once we agree we want to export, why do we want to export? I said in one of your stations last week, that this country must accept that there are certain things, fundamentals that we need to have a dialogue between ourselves and leadership, and accept that those of us in leadership have failed, both from the private sector and the public sector, to agree on certain practical things. We don't need to do 10 things if we can do 2 and do them well. So that's what I want to encourage. But in terms of the export, I want to demystify the notion that export is difficult. Export is just about understanding the rules and be able to abide by them and supply on time as agreed, and that you must be able to honor and respect. But I must say thank you to government for having helped us to put together what I would consider the trade arrangements, trade agreements, they've all been signed. Thank you so much. Government must now step back and allow the business people to do the business as government facilitates. Okay. And the business people must also wake up in the morning and give themselves targets without having to point fingers on government every other day, even on what we can do as the business people.
Definitely. Wow. That is, philosophers call that attacking while defending, but very balanced indeed. Yeah. I know our target was to look how we can access the export market for the SMEs. Then we realized, back at home, there is too much to do within the ecosystem. If at all we are to have a productive conversation on how to tap the external market. But I'm glad that we've laid that foundation. A lot of mindset shift that needs to happen. A lot of practicality. I mean, we have very good policies on papers, implementation, but most importantly, how we do business and our business culture. We need to start aggregating, and that will be built on trust. Being able to say that I can do business. We can make money together, not just by myself, because I don't trust you. Quite fundamental. But still, the numbers don't lie. As economists say, we still have high potential. These are markets. Africa is a market. East Africa is a market. Asia is a market. Still, this number doesn't lie that 90% of our businesses actually do fall under the MSME. So if you want to change this economy, change this 90%. If you want to change the export game, as Africa, we are net importers. Kenya specifically, we are net importers. If we want to shift that narrative, change this sector 90%. Has been our conversation on matters SMEs, tapping into the export market, but also cleaning our own rooms right here within the country, bringing the cost of business down and just streamlining things. And you have that responsibility too of doing research so that you have the information of these opportunities as somebody who's running a small business or medium-sized business. Thank you very much for being part of this conversation. Thank you very much, Okisegro Ojapayat from Fresh Produce Consortium of Kenya. Thank you very much, Sheila Olang, economist,
Thank you.
who says economy must be felt.
Yes.
And finally, we have Victor Tieno from Vifor Consult. Thank you very much for your input in this conversation. My name is Noah Kipkemboi. And we put it a full stop right there. I know some of us are waiting for the next World Cup game, so enjoy that one. But for now, good night and bye-bye.